Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a source that is, well, it's pretty unflinching. It doesn't just predict the future, it paints this incredibly cynical picture of it.
It really does.
The source is a fictional narrative. It's called Shadow Exile, Zelensky's Final Choice.
Yeah.
And it lays out this hypothetical timeline from 2025 to 2027.
And our mission today is to really unpack its core argument. It's a stunning thought experiment, really. It details two massive global crises happening basically at the same time.
Right. On one hand, you have the collapse of the conflict in Ukraine in 2026.
And on the other, a very quick U.S.-led regime change in Venezuela. And the whole point of the source is to show you how these two separate events are deeply connected.
Connected by this theme of manufacturing heroes and then betraying them when they're no longer convenient.
Exactly.
And the source kicks off with this really potent symbol of that cynicism. It's a warning from December 2025 from Representative Thomas Massie.
He's arguing against intervening in Venezuela, and he asks this question that just hangs over the entire story. He says, do you really think if we remove Maduro, a modern George Washington will emerge?
Wow. And that phrase, modern George Washington, it becomes this inside joke in D.C., a symbol for, what? A puppet.
For a puppet, exactly. A manufactured hero. Massie's whole point was that this would fail because real power, real revolution doesn't work that way. And that's the thread that connects the slow, grinding betrayal in Kyiv to the explosive intervention in Caracas.
Okay, so let's start there. Let's start with that collapse in Ukraine.
We have to. To understand the whole picture, you have to see how that trust was broken first.
So the source sets the scene. It's the fall of 2026.
Right.
The war is in its fourth year. American attention has completely shifted to Venezuela, which we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But in Ukraine, defeat is described as just obvious.
It's over. The Eastern Front is in ruins, and more importantly, NATO support is just gone. Not just materially, but the political will has, evaporated.
But the source argues this was sealed years earlier, right? This isn't a 2026 failure.
No, not at all. It flashes back to this really pivotal moment, the Istanbul negotiations in March 2022.
Okay.
And according to this narrative, Russia was actually on the table with a workable peace deal. Ukrainian neutrality, some minor territorial concessions, peace was actually within reach.
And then what happens?
Boris Johnson happens. The source paints him as this agent of tragedy. He flies into Kyiv, and he directly tells Zelensky to fight on.
With a guarantee.
With a huge guarantee. He says, the West will not betray you. And the source is clear. Zelensky believed him. He took that promise at face value.
But all the aid that followed, all the speeches, the source calls it a fantasy.
A fantasy and half-hearted. The argument is that Johnson's intervention didn't guarantee victory. It just guaranteed 4 more years of war. It actively prevented peace.
That's a brutal indictment. So how does he deal with that realization?
Well, by the end, he fully understands he was a pawn. Just before he's forced into exile, he does this final online interview from his bunker. It's basically a confession.
And he says it outright.
He says it outright. He says if Johnson had not intervened, the war would have ended back in 2022. He names him.
Wow. And the reaction to that, I mean, that tells you everything.
It does. Russia, of course, they celebrate. They say, see, we told you. But the West turns on him immediately.
They call him a traitor.
A traitor for breaking ranks, for shattering the myth of unity. But really, he just exposed the fact that the support was never unconditional. He ruined the narrative. And at that exact moment, the U.S. is busy manufacturing a brand new narrative on the other side of the world.
Let's pivot to that. So January 2026, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro is captured by U.S. forces.
A quick, clean operation. And it creates this power vacuum that Washington has been waiting for.
And the source points to Vice President J.D. Vance as the architect of what comes next.
Yeah, he proposes this direct propaganda play. They need to rebrand the opposition leader, Maria Corina Machado, as the answer to Massie's cynical question.
They literally call her Maria Washington.
They do. It's a full-court press. She's framed as a Nobel laureate, a democratic hero. The whole transition is compared to the American Revolution.
And they even use that image, right, of her with an axe and a cherry tree.
A literal embodiment of the myth. It's so on the nose. The source says President Trump was skeptical she was popular enough, but he signed off on the branding.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
This is where the whole thing blows up in their face. Maria Washington is inaugurated, and she immediately does a complete 180.
She doesn't thank them.
She denounces them. She calls the U.S. intervention and the sanctions new colonialism. She says Venezuela just traded one master for another.
Fulfilling Massey's prophecy almost to the letter. A real leader isn't going to be a puppet.
Exactly. And she doesn't just stop at words. She declares a Venezuelan war of independence against the United States.
So there are uprisings.
Widespread armed uprisings. It forces this humiliating, rushed withdrawal of all U.S. troops. The hero they just built becomes their #1 enemy overnight.
And Trump's reaction is just one word.
Traitor! The U.S. is left holding an empty bag. And it just perfectly illustrates the source's main point. The second a hero stops being useful, they're discarded.
So now we have these two figures, Zelensky, the discarded pawn, and Maria Washington, the hero who broke free. What happens when they connect?
This is the shadow exile. In late 2026, Zelensky escapes Kyiv. And the source adds this fascinating little detail. His escape is actually facilitated by Venezuelan agents.
No way.
Yeah, they route him through Cuba and get him to Caracas. He arrives as a man with no country, totally toxic to the West.
And Maria Washington doesn't just offer him asylum.
No, she gives him an ultimatum, a truly cynical one. He has to become another Washington, but for her cause. He has to co-lead her anti-American war.
So the man who failed to stop a Russian invasion is now supposed to lead a guerrilla war against the U.S.
It's deeply, deeply ironic. The source says he's forced to study the life of George Washington, to use his global profile to command these anti-U.S. forces, all to leverage Venezuela's oil against America.
I can't get over that detail.
Yeah.
The comedian turned president forced to become an 18th century revolutionary.
And his televised speech from Caracas seals it. He declares, "The defeat of Ukraine is the betrayal of the U.S. I am no longer a puppet of the West. I fight for freedom."
That speech has to be the final straw for Washington.
It is. By January 2027, he's seen as just a failed investment who's now actively commanding forces fighting U.S. troops. The order comes down, Operation Counter Octopus.
To neutralize him.
To neutralize him, and it's swift. In February 2027, U.S. Special Forces grab him in the Venezuelan jungle, the same way they grabbed Maduro a year before.
He's put on trial.
In New York, at this special court called the International Military Crime Special Tribunal. The source is very clear this is modeled on the Tokyo trials. It's not about justice, it's about the victor writing the history.
And the charges.
Criminally prolonging the war in Ukraine and, of course, commanding anti-American terror activity in Venezuela.
But he doesn't just defend himself. He puts the whole system on trial.
He does. He doesn't deny the charges. Instead, he lays out what he calls the pattern. He lists all these historical examples of U.S. allies who were used and then, thrown away the second they became inconvenient.
And the names he brings up are pretty powerful. Osama bin Laden.
Right. Supported against the Soviets, then hunted as the world's #1 terrorist.
Saddam Hussein.
A collaborator against Iran, then invaded and executed.
Manuel Noriega.
A longtime CIA asset, then kidnapped on drug charges. And he brings up the most recent one, Muammar Gaddafi.
Who gave up his nuclear program in good faith.
In good faith.
Yeah.
Reconciled with the West and then was bombed and killed by NATO-backed forces just a few years later. Zelensky basically stands there and says, my life follows this exact same pattern. You supported me, you used me, and now you're criminalizing me for the disaster you helped create.
And he directly compares his situation to the Tokyo trials.
He does. He's making the point that this is a show trial. He quotes the defense counsel Blakely, who said, "If the victor judges the vanquished, it is vengeance, not justice."
And he brings up that challenge from Ishihara Kanji, right?
Right.
If you judge the Manchurian incident, why not judge Perry?
Exactly. It's such a powerful point. He's asking, if you're going to judge my actions, why do you get total immunity for your own invasions, your own betrayals, simply because you're the superpower? You're the one who won.
And then there's that dramatic moment with Boris Johnson in the courtroom.
Yeah, he bursts out. He says he might have been wrong, but he genuinely believed Zelensky would win. He's desperate.
And Zelensky's response just cuts through everything.
You were also a pawn. It's so weary, so final. And with that, he's sentenced to life in prison, a U.S. facility, ironically, in Venezuela.
But the story doesn't end there. The source saves its biggest philosophical point for last.
Right. The focus shifts back to Maria Washington in Caracas. As Zelensky's being locked away, she holds a press conference.
This is where it gets really deep. She talks about the true lesson of George Washington, not the school book version.
No, she talks about an oral legend passed down from the enslaved people on his estate, a story called Lightning in the Backyard, the Truth of the Cherry Tree.
Okay, so unhack this for us. The myth we all know is about honesty.
The myth is that Washington confessed to cutting the tree, and his father praised his honesty. But the secret history, the one passed down by an enslaved man named Osiris, was much darker.
What was it?
Martha Washington apparently revealed the truth one night. The father didn't praise his son for being honest. He praised him because the boy was still holding the axe.
He was afraid of him.
He was afraid of him. He saw the power in his son's hand and realized it was safer to praise him than to punish him.
So heroism, statecraft. It's not about morality. It's about who's holding the axe. A cynical calculation of fear.
That is the absolute core of the source's philosophy. The public gets the myth, but the truth of power is hidden in the backyard. And Maria Washington's final line is, well, it's chilling. She says, heroes stand on myth, but we will not drop the axe.
Wow. So she understands the real game? Never give up your leverage.
Never, and that brings the whole narrative full circle. You go from a failed U.S.-backed Washington in Ukraine to a self-made anti-American Washington in Venezuela with the pawn Zelensky crushed between them.
So for you, listening to this, the core takeaway is pretty stark. The source suggests great power politics is just. It's theater.
It's a recurring performance. Figures are dressed up as heroes, given a script, and then sacrificed when their role is over. Or in Maria Washington's case, when they dare to write their own lines.
The source leaves us with this final provocative thought. It circles back to Zelensky's tragedy and that endless fight for Venezuelan oil, suggesting this cycle is just ready to repeat. And the only real question it asks is this. Now that the stage is clear, in this ruthless game of power and myth, who will be the next pawn?